Okay, so the tier list just got completely reshuffled with the release of Recoleta in CM, so I kind of had to completely scrap the previous tier list and make a new one. Before we get into the ranking themselves though, there are a few things I want you to keep in mind. First, this tier list is specifically made for Reverie in the Rain, the hardest content in the game right now, and the only place where chasing meta actually matters. The ranking themselves are based on a mix of DPS, team viability, flexibility, utility, and overall rotation feel. Some characters in higher tier are only there when used with specific teammates, and without the right team, they'd actually be ranked lower. Then there are also characters like Yang Yue, who's on paper higher rank than I ranked her. But at P0, her rotation just doesn't feel that smooth, and doesn't justify a S tier for me. Also, if a character isn't on the list, they are in the D tier, which means I don't really think they're worth racing for most of the Reverie stages. And of course, this is based on my personal experience playing these characters, so if some placement seems off to you, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comment down below. Let's start with C tier. We can break this character into 4 groups. First, there's Matilda. Thanks to her Euphoria, she's now a part of the Impromptu Incantation team. If you absolutely have to play that team but don't have the Eureka characters, she's a great option? Maybe. That said, I don't really recommend building her Euphoria, it's just not worth it in the long term. Next, we have Brimley and Axe. Both are utility characters that can help in some of the more annoying stages. Brimley fills a similar role to Six since both can purify debuffs. Meanwhile, Axe is focused on removing enemy buffs and applying crowd control, making certain fights much easier. Then there is Sonato, Baby Blue, and Lorelei. I call this the beginner supports because they all have the same niche, offering some damage reduction and slight damage boost to the team. Their number ain't that impressive by today's standard, but for new players, they are solid for clearing some of the early stages. Lastly, we have the healers. They work just like the beginner support. They're decent for early stages, but will struggle as you dive further. Loggerhead actually has better healing potential than the other 2 characters, but I don't feel like putting her on the same tier as Tooth Fairy, so she is staying in C tier for now. Moving on to B tier, these characters are usable throughout Reveries, but far from being the best in slot for the role they fill. First up, we have Euphoria Jessica and Euphoria Druvius. Petrify is cool, and against enemy without tenacity, it is possible to stun lock them forever, but right now, it just can't compete with the brute force things through damage. And Jessica's damage is way too low by today's standard. Windsong is viable in some stages, but most of the time she's a nightmare to play. Her rotation is very strict and she leaves almost no room for sustain. And unless you are in one of the few fights where enemy don't wipe your team in the first 2 turns if you don't heal, she will be very difficult to use. Jay and 37 are seeing a resurgence thanks to Flutterpage and Euphoria Babble, but the problem is those 2 are just better used elsewhere. The team built around Jay and 37 will almost always be outperformed by stronger options. Gatien is still somewhat viable as reality support, but at this point, he's just not keeping up with today's standard as far as damage bonus goes. Shimim barely made it out of the D tier thanks to him having some synergy with one of the most broken character in the game right now, Recoleta, but let's be real, he's nowhere near best in slot. Melania will always take one spot, and supports that offer damage bonus and crit buffs are way more valuable than Shaman for the other spots, who only slightly speed up the rotation that's already fast enough without him. Tooth Fairy also dropped down here now that the Medicine Puck finally got his Euphoria. Unfortunately, when comparing to the other 6-star healers now, Tooth Fairy is just not keeping up, both in healing and in damage boosting potential. Now, A tier is where things start to getting really good. These characters are frequently used and sometimes has unique niches that make them valuable for certain stages. Lilia got a huge boost. not just from her own Euphoria, but also from Melania's Euphoria, which is so busted that it actually puts her on par with, or even better than, Junyangzi. Speaking of Junyangzi, for a true limited character, she could really use an Euphoria right now. Liang Yue is another true limited character in the A tier. She's technically stronger than the DPS in this tier. She works incredibly well with Flutter Page and Mercuria, pumping out both AoE and single target damage. But at P0, her mechanics and rotations are just too junky, and that alone keeps her out of S tier for me. However, there is one stage that she has over 99% use rate, with the rest being Winsome, so do keep that in mind when skipping her. Marcus is still Marcus. She's not an overpowered DPS in any way, but she's pretty consistent. Her team hasn't changed much in multiple patches, and Myth helps her out with the double casting high rank incantations. The impromptu incantation team could be ranked higher, but honestly, I'm just not a big fan of the gameplay and rotation here. They have insane damage potential, but it's kinda clunky, and I'm keeping them in A tier for that. Voyager is actually an amazing character in Reverie that could potentially place in S tier. This is because of her anti-ultimate mechanic that gives her more flexibility and can be used on turn 1. Euphoria Eternity is now a must-have support for SimOS with her health burning passive, but her own power is not that incredible, so she stays in A rank. An Unli brings free incantation rank up and tons of debuffs, making her a pretty solid general support for plant and debuff teams. 6 is the best purifier in the game before Fututu. Compared to Brimley, he gives a lot extra survivability on top of the purify. Now A tier actually has 2 5-star here. First is Euphoria Cornbloom. I wouldn't recommend going all in on her right now, but she does benefit a ton from Melania's Euphoria just like every other ultimate DPS. She's also one of the best replacements for Noire for that one fight in Reverie that's designed specifically for her. Then there is Necrologist, who's still the best 5-star damage support in the game. Her ultimate gives the team a 50% damage bonus at P5, and she also provides a one-use revive, which is game-changing for players trying to clear Reverie without every meta units. Now for S tier, most of these characters are must-pulls, but only if you have the right team for them. Lucy is just a great all-around unit. Her ability to always deal Amplitude's advantage damage is insanely useful in Reveries. That said, at P0, she takes way too long to ramp up in some of the fights, which make her frustrating in those fights. The Hags of Poison comes in pairs, and comes in pairs only. But when you do have both of them, they are so good at brute forcing fights that the devs are literally banning them from certain stages. Some enemies now have 80% or even 100% Genesis damage taken reduction just to stop Poison Team from being used. But for stages where you can use them, you barely have to think. Just do their rotation and watch everything die when the array ends. They're especially tanky with Sotheby and Kakania, but without them, they will struggle to survive since they're super action hungry. Noire is strong, but you probably don't need to pull for her. Her direct power creep is coming right after her, and that new unit is better in every way. That said, she is still a very powerful DPS and also benefited a lot from Melania's Euphoria, which is good enough to push her to S tier. SimOS was the best mineral support last patch, but now she's dropped to a 2nd place. Even so, she is still incredibly strong. In the next few patches for Global, she will continue to get stronger with some new Euphorias and characters. But here is the catch, she absolutely needs Euphoria Eternity or Euphoria Madison Pocket to be with her, ideally both. Without them, her follow-up hits significantly weaker, making her much less effective. Arcus is a great overall support, simple debuffs, a free dispel, and solid utility. The only downside is her debuff is a single target only, and that's literally all she does. Now, Sotheby actually dropped from S+ tier to S tier this time and is now grouped with Lopera and Villa. And there is a simple reason for that. All 3 of these healers have a small flaw. Sotheby has great sustain but doesn't offer much damage boost. Meanwhile, Lopera and Vela gives insane damage boost to the DPS. But their sustain isn't enough for a lot of Reverie stages. Sustain has become a competitive role, and to be a S+ tier right now, you need to do both. Now for S+ tier, these are the apex characters of the current meta, either because they define their team or because they're just that broken. First up, we have the latest CN release, Recoleta. She is an insanely powerful ultimate DPS that completely outclasses Noire in every single way, and with Melania's Euphoria releasing alongside her, it's no exaggeration to see that she is currently the strongest DPS in the game right now. Anjo is still up here, and for good reasons. She has insane damage, insane control effect, and perfect synergy with the best support in the game. She is also one of the easiest character to brute force fights with, which is always a huge plus. Pickles finally broke into the S+ tier. He has stuck in the S tier before because he was limited to mineral teams, which now happen to include the most broken character, Recoleta. On top of that, he also automatically dispels enemy buffs every turn, making him one of the most valuable units in Reveries. Melania's Euphoria turned her into the ultimate support. Her unique buff Fixed Plan now affects the entire team, giving up to 72% ultimate bite, 36% crit rate, and 36% crit damage on ultimate. Plus, she now applies Moxie Extraction on enemy with her basic incantation, meaning allies will be able to consume the stack to gain Moxie when hitting those enemies. If you're running an ultimate focused teams, you absolutely want her. Mercuria and Flatterpage are both here as just top tier passive supports. Mercuria is more universal, while Flatterpage is locked to follow-up teams but provides more raw damage in exchange. Now for sustain, the S+ tier sustain are what I call the jack of all trades but also master of all. Babel is now the shield bot of the game. She also just got her third signature Psycube from Betty's Anecdote, which massively buffed her shield's strength. She not only prevent enemy from one-shotting your team, but also give a solid crit rate boost based on shield amount, making her even better. And Madison Puck is now the healer for health burning team. If you want proof of how good his sustain is, just look at this footage. On top of the sustain, his debuff got a huge update. Now additionally cause the attack against the enemy to benefit from 30% more crit rate and 40% more crit damage, making him even more valuable. Kakania is one of the best defensive supports in the game just by existing. She consistently deals Genesis damage, making her team significantly tankier by sharing their damage, which is especially useful for players relying on Lopera or Vela for healing, as she basically fixes their lack of sustain while adding extra damage. Fatutu does everything. Her shell buff massively increased the damage enemy take from follow-up attacks, and her skill 1 autocast constantly thanks to her passive, which purifies 1 debuff from the entire team each time. This level of utility is absolutely unmatched. She also has a unique damage sharing buff that evenly spread out incoming damage, protecting squishier characters. In some cases, this is even better than Kakania's passive for keeping team alive. And that's a wrap for the tier list. If you agree, disagree, or have thoughts on any of this ranking, drop a comment down below. I'd love to hear what you think as well. Hopefully this video helps you figure out who's worth building next. Reverie in the Rain is a brutal mode, but you don't have to clear everything right away. It's mainly for Euphoria materials, and unless you're planning to Euphoria every single character, there is no need to rush to clear everything immediately. And as always, this has been SteamBandX. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.